It's October 24th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with a joint statement adopted by the leaders of South Korea and Saudi Arabia. In the first statement in over 4 decades, President Yoon and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman have agreed to a broaden cooperation to renewable energy, carbon zero, and eco-friendly construction. And that's on top of their $2.4 billion gas plant deal secured on Monday. 2 women held captive by Hamas in Gaza have been released following mediation by Qatar and Egypt. The Palestinian militant group said the release was for humanitarian reasons, including poor health. Tottenham Hotspur's Heung-min scored his 7th Premier League goal of this season and chipped in with an assist to help his side to a 1-0 victory over Fulham. President Yoon has declared a new era of partnership for Korean and Saudi firms in building cities of the future. Now, this came as major companies signed deals to work on massive mega-city projects in Saudi Arabia. Our correspondent Oh Soo-young reports from Riyadh.
President Yoon mapped out the future of South Korea and Saudi Arabia's cooperation in the digital post-oil era, as construction and IT giants from each side penned major deals to build smart cities and infrastructure. This came as Yoon on Monday marked the 50th anniversary of South Korea's first entry into the Saudi construction sector at a multimedia exhibit in Riyadh showcasing the country's NEOM line, a linear car-free sustainable city projected to open in 2039.
처음에 2천만 불에서 시작한 양국의 건설 협력 규모는 반세기 만에 1,600억 불로 확대됐습니다.
Reflecting on the decades of Korean firms and workers involved in over 1,900 projects across Saudi Arabia, Yoon called for the two countries to now build on their solid foundation of cooperation to meet the evolving demands of the times.
사우디는 새로운 국가 비전의 일환으로 네옴시티와 같은 메가 프로젝트를 추진하고 있습니다. 여기에 한국이 보유하고 있는 첨단 도시 건설 역량을 결합한다면 양국이 함께 미래 도시의 새로운 모델을 전 세계에 보여줄 수 있습니다.
South Korea's Haman Corporation first won a $24 million contract to build a 164-kilometer-long expressway in Saudi Arabia in 1973, which opened the door to more construction projects in the Middle East. This in turn became a stepping stone for South Korean firms to make a leap into the global market and play a major role in modernizing the country's economy. As he called for a new era of infrastructural cooperation, the president oversaw the signing of 4 major deals for Korean firms in Saudi, a $2.4 billion contract to work on the Jafurah gas plant facility, a contract to build a digital twin platform, a virtual geospatial model of the real world for urban planning and management in 5 Saudi cities, along with an MOU on modular construction and an agreement to roll out digital infrastructure. Also on Monday, Yoon attended the Korea-Saudi Future Technologies Partnership Forum, where he discussed ways to strengthen collaboration on science and technology, focusing on 4 major fields including digital, clean energy, biohealth and space. Yoon's office says as both countries seek cutting-edge innovation and sustainability going forward, South Korea aims to increase joint research projects and people-to-people exchanges with Saudi Arabia, fostering a future-oriented partnership based on science and technology. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News, Riyadh.
Also in Riyadh, the two sides released their first joint statement in 43 years. The two also freshly voiced concerns over the Israel-Hamas conflict. Our Kim Do-yeon has the details.
South Korea and Saudi Arabia jointly rejected actions targeting civilians in the escalating situation between Israel and Palestine, while agreeing to work with the international community for swift humanitarian assistance to suffering civilians. The statement also said the two sides stressed the importance of intensifying efforts to prevent the conflict from spreading and the need for political solution and durable peace based on the two-state solution. This as Seoul and Riyadh came up with a joint statement on Tuesday, their first in 43 years, in light of President Yoon Suk-yeol's state visit to Saudi Arabia hosted by Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. The statement, comprised of 44 specific items of cooperation between Seoul and Riyadh, covered all areas, from economic cooperation and cultural exchanges to regional security in the Middle East and East Asia. The two also agreed to actively explore the expansion of mutual investments in areas including the hydrogen economy, smart cities, future mobility means, and startups. As the two countries celebrate 50 years since South Korea's first construction project in Saudi Arabia, they agreed to continue building on this exchange with Saudi's ambitious Vision 2030 and NEOM project and other giga projects such as the Red Sea project. The statement also showed motivations for the two to enhance cooperation in defense and defense industry. In fact, on Monday, President Yoon also met with Khalid bin Salman Al Saud, Saudi defense minister, and other military officials, where they showed interest in jointly working with South Korea's arms production. The top office says this has paved the way for even more export deals for South Korean arms companies. Energy cooperation, conventional and new, was also mentioned in the statement. Saudi Arabia pledged to be the most reliable partner for crude oil, while South Korea is set to work with Riyadh for clean hydrogen and peaceful use of nuclear energy. Both sides also welcomed the growing popularity of Korean culture in Saudi Arabia and agreed expanding opportunities for civilian exchanges between the two countries. Kim Do-yeol, Arirang News.
We turn to the war in Gaza now. 2 more Israeli hostages were released by Hamas on Monday, despite Israel carrying out limited raids in the region. Lee Seung-ja has more.
Hamas announced Monday the release of 2 more Israeli hostages. This time, the militant group released 2 elderly women, aged 85 and 79 years old, who had been taken captive during a surprise attack on Israel by Hamas earlier this month. Hamas says the release was mediated by Egypt and Qatar. This follows the release of 2 Americans who on Friday also among the over 200 abducted by Hamas gunmen over 2 weeks ago. Meanwhile, Israel continues its offensive in Gaza, this time conducting a limited overnight raid in the Palestinian enclave. Israel says its incursions overnight from Sunday into Monday were partly intended to gather intelligence and had helped improve its military readiness. Hamas says its fighters hit back, launching 2 attack drones at military posts on Monday. The UN's World Food Program began distributing humanitarian aid in Gaza on Monday after trucks carrying some essential items were allowed into the region through the Rafah crossing. However, despite the much-needed help reaching the Gazans, WFP says the amount is far less than what's needed.
The truck crossing Rafah border are a small window of hope, but they are nowhere near enough to meet the rising needs of the people inside Gaza. We cannot afford to wait. We need to deliver life-saving supplies continuously and at a much larger scale.
According to health officials in Gaza, nearly 5,100 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza, with children reportedly making up 40% of the dead. Lee Seung-ja, Arirang News.
China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi is expected to visit the U.S. this week ahead of a potential summit between the two countries' leaders. Citing White House officials, outlets including CNN and NBC reported Monday that China's top diplomat will visit Washington from October 26th to the 28th and meet with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. The visit follows a trip by Blinken to Beijing in June as part of efforts by Washington to maintain open communication channels with Beijing and stabilize tensions that intensified over the Chinese spy balloon incident earlier this year. Sources say North Korea, the South China Sea, the Middle East, and Russia's war in Ukraine will be among the issues discussed, and a potential Biden-Xi meeting during the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit in San Francisco next month may also be on the agenda. Today, October 24th, marks United Nations Day, which recognizes the founding of the UN in 1945. Marking this special occasion, we're discussing what the UN has long fought for and pursued, the protection of human rights. We're joined by James Heung-min this morning. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Sure. According to reports, China 2 weeks ago forcefully sent back around 600 North Korean defectors who were detained in the provinces of Seoul and Riyadh. Why is it concerning that defectors have returned home?
Well, the High Commissioner for Human Rights said to the Security Council last month that forcibly repatriating people to the DPRK puts them at real risk of things like torture, ill treatment, arbitrary detention and other serious human rights violations. And these risks have been documented for years by the UN. The High Commissioner has said, and we've said publicly, that the persistence of those sorts of risks mean that those people in China should be given immediate protection and not sent back.
Right. The penalties and the risks those North Korean defectors may face could go as far as a death penalty. That's why it's so concerning. Now, South Korea has long condemned China's reported repatriation of North Korean refugees at the UN. How is then China's role important in stopping these grave human rights incidents?
Well, the obligations, which is not just about China, it's about any country sending, forcibly repatriating individuals to DPRK. All countries have an obligation under international law not to send people back to face these sorts of serious risks. And that obligation is what we call customary international law. It's an obligation that applies to all countries around the world. And it's an obligation that we urge all countries to abide by, particularly at the moment.
Right, those responsibilities and obligations do lie on not only on China, but also all countries who respect and pursue human rights. Now, civilians over in the Middle East are also facing human rights violations. We have to talk about that. How should countries or parties, involved in the Gaza war, especially Israel and Hamas, manage and ensure human rights?
Well, it's a very different situation, but I mean, the key point is that human rights don't disappear during conflict. They continue to apply. There are some special rules during conflict about, as you've reported, protecting civilians and so forth. But the basic rights about the right to life, the right to food, those sorts of things, those sorts of rights continue during the conflict and they have to be upheld. We would say that the key thing in these times is to stick to international law and be guided by international law, because it is really the strongest agreed international framework on dealing with these sorts of difficult issues. And when you have two competing narratives, as you do in any conflict, but particularly in this one, international law gives a sort of hopefully an agreed framework for people to move forward, and also will lend some credibility to the process, because you're saying we're just following international law. So it's key for us that the law be followed. And the law isn't vague or unclear. It's very clear, very detailed, and very implementable.
Right. The same applies to any type of conflict happening around the world. The Ukraine crisis as well, right?
Every conflict. And there are basic rules, for example, very clear rules about, in a conflict, you can't target civilians or civilian infrastructure. You can only target military and military infrastructure. So it applies globally, yes.
Right, and global bodies like the UN and countries and representatives like you around the world have been actively voicing the importance of protecting human rights. Then how can we as ordinary global citizens really contribute to doing that?
That's a question I get quite a lot. That's a hard one. I mean, it can be overwhelming. We sit at home, we watch the media like now or social media, and we get an overwhelming level of information about misery around the world, particularly from Ukraine, the Middle East and other places, and DPRK. So we can feel a sense of hopelessness, powerlessness. Well, I would say people need to, first of all, stand up for their own human rights wherever they are, and stand up for the rights of others, because that's something that that's the building blocks for a society that respects human rights, respect and stand up for the rights of others. Also, don't take your rights for granted, because we've seen history shows they can be taken away very quickly and then it's too late. I would also say that everyone can urge their governments to say, listen, you have signed up to this international law. We as citizens of your country expect you to apply it.
Definitely, James. Thanks so much for joining us this morning, and we appreciate your service.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Tottenham Hotspur's Heung-min's goal and assist helped his side to a 2-0 victory over Fulham on Monday night. Playing at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in London, Son scored his 7th league goal of the season in the 36th minute. The South Korean captain will later assist James Maddison in the 54th minute to give Spurs the win. Son moves up to second place in the race for the Premier League Golden Boot, alongside Liverpool's Mohamed Salah, with whom he shared the goal-sharing prize in the 2021-2022 season. The 2-0 victory also puts Tottenham on the top of the league, 2 points ahead of Manchester City and Arsenal. South Korea celebrates October as Culture Month every year. And this year's event took place in Sinan-gun County, Jeollanam province this past weekend. Our culture correspondent Song Yu-jin was there.
Way down in the southern part of South Korea is Sinan-gun County in Jeollanam province. This area is made up of more than 1,000 small islands. One of these islands is Cheondo, the host of this year's Culture Month. Korea has celebrated October as Culture Month since 1972 to deepen public appreciation and engagement with the arts and culture. Different places have taken their turn in hosting the celebration, but Cheondo is the first island to do so. One of the highlights this year was a lecture by American artist James Turrell. Hailed as the virtuoso of light, he's known for his large-scale installations using light and space, such as his Sky Space series. Throughout his 6-decade career, Turrell has developed a strong passion for showcasing art in areas that are mostly inaccessible.
We generally look at culture as being in the big cities. Of course, that makes a certain kind of culture as well. And I'm very interested in taking art into nature, because then you can have a more powerful expression. I think also it's good sometimes to take a journey to go to art, so that helps prepare you for it.
This idea fits perfectly with Sinan-gun County's Island and Art project, which aims to change its isolated remote islands into places for art. Part of this plan is building the James Turrell Art Museum on Nodae-do Island.
Nodae is the island that I think would be very good for this. I like it partly because there's no bridge, that is, you actually have to journey by boat, another way to get there. And also, this surrounding of water completely is something I think is special.
Another standout is music. Students from a local elementary school put on the Sinan traditional performance Handai, featuring dancing and singing. 104 pianists representing the 1,004 islands of Sinan took the stage, playing classical music to traditional Korean folk songs.
So from hosting this year's Culture Month to its goal of becoming a hub for world-renowned artists, Sinan-gun County is evolving into a new center for arts and culture. Song Yu-jin, Arirang News, Sinan.
Good morning, I'm Si-young Kim, and now we turn over to stories from around the world. American oil giant Chevron announced Monday the purchase of rivals Hess Corporation in a $53 billion all-stock deal. Chevron will pay for Hess using their own stock, meaning Hess shareholders will receive 1.0250 shares in Chevron, worth about $171 in cash terms for each Hess share. The Chevron-Hess mega deal comes less than 2 weeks after ExxonMobil's acquisition of Pioneer Natural Resources for around $60 billion. It also widens the gap in terms of fossil fuels, with European energy rivals who have shifted focus to renewable resources. The deal's a boost for major U.S. oil firms as they move to secure supply amid geopolitical conflict in Europe and the Middle East. An off-duty Alaska Airlines pilot has been charged with 83 counts of attempted murder after allegedly trying to turn off aircraft engines mid-flight. Named as Joseph David Emerson in arrest documents, the suspect had been riding in the cockpit's jump seat as an off-duty pilot on Sunday night when, according to an Alaska Airlines statement, he unsuccessfully attempted to disrupt the operation of the engines. Alaska Flight 2059, operated by Horizon Air, was en route from Seattle to San Francisco with 80 passengers on board when the incident was reported to air traffic control. After the flight was diverted to Oregon's Portland Airport, Emerson was arrested by the airport police. Now, sweet boy Bobby, the world's oldest dog, has died at the age of 31 years and 165 days. Born on the 11th of May 1992, the brown and white Portuguese Mastiff lived an exceptionally long life compared to his breed's average of 12 to 14 years. He passed away last Saturday in the Portuguese village of Conqueiros, where he was born and raised. Bobby lived for 2 years longer than the previous record holder, an Australian cattle dog called Bluey, who died in 1939.
Good morning. We are into the last stretch of autumn, known as Sanggang, the onset of frosty weather. While the chill will not pose a significant issue today, morning commuters faced a challenging ride due to the thick fog. Parts of Chuncheon had visibility that was as low as just 10 meters. However, some regions in Gangwon-do province remain under a dry weather advisory today, but the south remains under sunny skies all day. Meanwhile, central regions will see passing showers starting from the west and extending toward the capital by mid-afternoon. Seoul could receive between 5 to 10 millimeters of precipitation with thunder and lightning during the day. In terms of temperatures, afternoon highs are expected to be similar, if not significantly higher than previous days. Seoul topping out at 19 degrees Celsius, Daegu and Gwangju at 21 degrees this afternoon. Looking ahead, the Seoul forecast suggests a mix of rain and clouds persisting throughout the work week, whereas the southern regions can enjoy a stretch of sunny weather conditions. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. We'll be back tomorrow for Wednesday's edition at the same time, 9 a.m. Korea time.